Please join me in welcoming our panel discussion members, Emma Skulander from New South Wales, Priscilla Radice from Queensland, Melissa Nozza from South Australia, and Blake Leffer from New Zealand. What we've asked is for each of our presenters to introduce themselves and just give you a slightly different context.
I first.
Go first.
So I've been introduced. I'm the acting chief executive of Health Infrastructure, although Christopher Shaw's giving me a run for my money today, so maybe just until the end of the day. I am originally from the north of England. I'm from Derbyshire, and I've lived in Australia since 2008. And I actually have a really rough Northern English accent that's sort of shaken out of myself over the last little while. 5 years from the north of England, you speak to me, I'll suddenly start setting egg up in a duck or something along those lines. I went to university in Newcastle upon Tyne for now the reason my whole family supported the soccer team there, and we wanted to go to the games. But I studied medical microbiology there, and that's sort of my academic background. I put this picture on here as my favourite sculpture. It's the Angel of the North, and I used to drive past this on the way to university, sort of going home for the weekends and going back again. And the Angel of the North, the sculptor is Anthony Gormley, and she's a sculptor, a British sculptor, and actually Arab for the engineers. I was looking at some stats on this the other day. It's 20 metres tall, and its wingspan is 55 metres wide, and it's angled at 3.5 degrees sort of leaning forward to make sure that it can withstand 160 kilometre an hour winds. I used to drive past this thing sort of not every weekend, but when I needed to probably check in with my family. And I drive back up the A1, and it would be sideways rain and absolutely disgusting weather most times driving up down the A1. Sorry to be finger people here. But this sculpture, Anthony Gormley sort of said that it's representing a female's life on Twitter. It's a little bit of mine. Yeah, mine is. The other one said it represents the transition from industrial to technology or industrial to information, and the change of age. The other one is hope. And the reason I chose this is I think it's a real symbol of resilience to me. And the brain, every time I'm having a bad day, I'm sort of working my way through why we can't build hospitals faster, or somebody tell me standardization is causing the problems and they've got innovation that they'll bring along. I remember the resilient Angel of the North. I think it always sticks with me. Thank you.
Beautiful. I think we've all got one. Is that working? So you go, Melissa. We'll jump out of order. Good. Dun, dun, dun.
Well,
off you go.
that's
You go.
What's going on to me? So, hi everyone, I'm Mel. Everybody calls me Mel. I'm Cancerian. I'm born in the year of the horse, and I'm a bit of a crazy rabbit lady.
Sorry. It's a lot of animals.
So, recently Taylor Swift did refer to herself as the childless cat lady, so I suppose I can kind of refer to myself as the childless rabbit lady. So my little fur baby is Chrissy, and he's almost 8 years old, so he's in his golden era, and he's a rescue rabbit. I rescued him from my nieces, and he is now living his best life in my home. So he's the man of the house. So I've often been referred to as an Energizer Bunny, as a 5-foot terror, as a pocket rocket, and everybody can hear me before they see me, so I probably don't even need the microphone. You'll hear me from far and wide. My hobbies are cooking, wildlife and nature photography, and I've got a couple of my favourite photos there, and socialising and shopping, and I love the shopping in Sydney, so I might sneak away a little bit. He's a bit early today just to do a bit of shopping. So my values that I'm known for is my connection to people and my relationships with people. Also, I'm very enthusiastic, very positive person, and also I love to have a laugh, and I don't take life too seriously. Also, lastly, my favourite quote is from the Dalai Lama. So if you think you're too small to make a difference, you haven't spent the night with a mosquito. I kind of think of myself as a living mosquito in this world. And yeah, I think that's probably sums all of me up. So yeah, and the top signs to spot a Cancerian, yep, that's pretty much me, and especially the last one. So watch out for the last one, which says the scariest ones when they get angry. So luckily it doesn't happen too often. Thank you.
Where's it like?
Oh, back to me. So I grew up in country WA, so sheep and wheat farm in the middle of nowhere. So closest hospital for us was via a plane. I am a bit of a baker, learnt to bake because we would have a lot of shearers that would come at regular intervals, and that was part of what you'd need to do, but I would normally sneak off and be much more excited in being in the shearing shed and working on the fleeces and not baking, but I did get the skill set. I put in there that I'm a volleyball mum because anyone who knows volleyball, it changes really quickly and your heart rate is up a lot all of the time, and it shifts and changes, and you really see how a team comes together beautifully and how the parents cope with that level of stress. We all think we should be a thesis study for how much it might impact our hearts over time, but it teaches a lot about resilience as well and being able to pivot your strategy quickly. Coming from the bush, I need to spend time in the bush. Nature's really important to me. I live in cities. I love cities. Having grown up a long, long, long way away from one in rural WA, where it's the most remote city in the world, and it's not really much of a city, although it's grown a lot nowadays. I was always fascinated by big cities. So I did my thesis on port cities and how they were adjusting to economies, and very reflective, and used to work for Arup, and what symbols of artwork that Emma just talked about are so important to communities. Like to travel. That's my fun line onto some hill in Athens, where he tries to keep me somewhat fit by keeping up with him. And yeah, family's really important to me, but work has always been very important to me as well. So balancing those two things together means that I need to make sure my work is really purposeful. Otherwise, I resent spending time away from my family. So that combination means everything to me.
Like,
Hi, firstly, thanks all for having me here. It's great to be over here and connect with so many familiar faces and some new faces. Like we said, I'm Blake Lepper, Head of Infrastructure Delivery with Health New Zealand. And those who have been to my market engagement sessions, I did one over here a few weeks ago, you might know about my skiing history. So I spent most of my life carrying skis to the tops of mountains on kind of continents around the world, and I put these here because there's a few things that I learned from my time doing that always hold true in my leadership and how I'm chasing the challenges in front of me. I think the things that I took away from these photos are, when you are confronted with a huge mountain, it's very easy to get overwhelmed. And really what I've learned is, while you must have an idea of what you want to get and the vague path to get there, actually climbing a mountain really is about those small steps and making sure every step along the way you have secure footing and you're getting where you need to go. The second thing I learned is you must absolutely trust those people around you. You trust them with your life in the mountains and with success in an organisation and a challenge. And then finally, it's also meant to be fun. So make sure you have people around you, like my children on the last, who know how to make you laugh, make them laugh. And that's wee Walter with his koala bear hat that his godfather from Tasmania gave him to him. And it's the proudest thing he owns. He loves it.
thanks very much, folks. I think it's always interesting to have some of those personal insights. So the challenge we gave our panel was recognising that healthcare systems face similar challenges around Australia. They've all got different conditions that set them apart. And addressing pressing requirements without inadvertently creating future problems requires doing better, not just more. So I asked each of them to give us clear insights on the world in which they live, a little bit of the past, and a little bit of the look ahead.
This is an overview of how 2024 went for us, and I think many of you will know, especially if you're from New South Wales, that we've had a change of government of late, and we're sort of getting into that rhythm now with the new government in New South Wales. We also, at Health Infrastructure, have had a change of chief executive, and I'm currently acting in that role at the moment. So our 2024 objective really was just to survive, and I'm still here. So business as usual really has continued, and I think it's a testament to the teams and many of the people in the room here who contribute to just keeping stuff moving, and certainly 2024 has been about that for us. We've spent around $2 billion this year, and we've handed over 9 critical facilities. So one of the big ones that took a lot of energy has been Tweed Valley Hospital, which was a big milestone for us, a long time in the planning, and getting to the delivery phase of that and commissioning that facility was a big one, as well as in the Metro, Canberra Town Stage 2 was a very big one and a great achievement for us as well. We have also managed to, within that, sort of continue doing some of our strategic work, and in particular, I'll just mention our Arts in Health program, which we've put a lot of energy into, and we've got some great expertise in-house who build arts into the facilities that we deliver. But really what we've been focused on this year is trying to make sure that when Health Infrastructure walks away, the local health districts have the capability to continue to run the programs that we embed as we deliver the infrastructure, and we're getting some great outcomes in that regard. We've also managed to successfully embed the culture standard in the delivery of our projects, so trying to shift to not necessarily a 5-day working week as rigidly as that for the building contractors, but certainly some flexibility within that, and trying to encourage more women particularly to work in the construction sector. So we've achieved that within the sort of confines of our program. We've been working on standardisation of design, and noting that's been a topic of discussion today. We might come back to that a little bit later. And we try to sort of get ahead of well, it's not ahead, it's behind the sustainability requirements, but it's probably ahead of some of the government's sustainability agenda in terms of measurement of carbon and how we can lay some sort of foundational work towards that. So we have achieved some work in that space, but there's certainly a lot more work to do there. And we've been trying to increase our engagement with industry, so really accelerating conversations and engagements, and probably work like, being here today and trying to get some feedback from industry on the work that we do. Don't stress about the straight screen, I'll survive. Could I have the next slide, please? This is the New South Wales pipeline, which I think is just relevant to talk about for an understanding of for the consultants in the room. And you can see that this year we're on that $2 billion mark, which we've delivered in the past. But we're working towards next year $3 billion, which is our biggest year ever. And it's very hard to spend $3 billion with our sort of construct. So it's going to be a very difficult year, I think, just trying to churn ahead on some of our construction projects. $3 billion, I don't know if we'll actually get there, but we'll be close to, but then starts to drop off in the years ahead. And I think noting, so at the moment, we've not got very many projects coming through planning. We will get some more next year, but probably fewer. That all of our architectural tenders for work that we've got underway are already out and gone and let. There's a couple of engineering ones left, but not a huge amount. But that will start to pick up, and I guess I just wanted to make the point that this is quite typical of a government cycle. We're in this lull year where they're not really starting yet to look ahead to the next election, and so they haven't sort of picked up again. So we're enjoying this moment of reprieve to try and focus on spending that $3 billion, but the consultants probably are feeling a little bit like, where's the next piece of work coming from? And I think just bear in mind that the cycle should lift up again, but we won't know that probably until the middle of next year or a bit beyond. So looking ahead to next year, there's a lot of policy change coming through, and you will have probably heard around some of the government inquiries that were undertaken as a commitment of Labor when they came in. And in health, we've got an extra inquiry called the Special Commission into Expenditure of Healthcare Funding or something along those lines. And that's still going, and every week they're onto a new topic. And certainly they've been looking at infrastructure and how infrastructure is supporting the health system under that. And I think that will churn out some change next year, which will, I think we get a draft report early in the new year and know what comes from that. But certainly some of the inquiries into consultant spending in New South Wales have affected how we operate, and we've had to look very carefully at how we procure consultants. we maintain the delivery model that we have. We're not going to start building an architectural firm in New South Wales Government, although I think somebody probably thought we were at some point in time. But we've certainly emphasised that we need to maintain this industry expertise that we can tap into and make sure that industries travelling around the world and giving these amazing examples and presentations and bringing them back to us so that we can pick those up. If we start building our own capability, and that it will be a disaster. And so we're certainly, from a design consultant perspective, we're certainly making that point, and they're sort of ring-fenced outside of some of this consultant work, but certainly the consultant inquiry across New South Wales Government has affected more that advisory sort of work. We also have some new policy change coming through in the environmental space, and next year we've been doing the groundwork towards that. I mentioned before, we're fully electrifying hospitals. I think that's sort of everyone's business as usual. But next year we're starting to see a new infrastructure carbonisation policy. And yours didn't get wrong. Decarbonising infrastructure policy is coming into play, and we're consulting on that at the moment. But the implications of that are sort of doing more in the business case space, trying to build in carbon into decision making, which is a step that we've struggled to sort of get to at the moment, but we'll be sort of pushing ourselves to get there. We're also reviewing the Green Building Council, the 5-star rating. We haven't historically used that in New South Wales. We've sort of had an alternative version. I think we're probably heading down the pathway of implementing that 5-star Green Star for New South Wales Health, but more to come on that next year. So change is a constant, and I guess that's the point here. We are evolving, but it's not necessarily through our own drivers and our own focus on innovation. In some of it, it's whole of government policy that we're building into what we're doing. And I think that context is important, because whilst we need to make sure that we still deliver the best healthcare outcomes on the way through, we also have to take into consideration some of this stuff that's happening in the background. Over to you, Priscilla.
Thanks, Emma. That was great. Similar kind of journey. Just next slide, thanks. So we're also in Queensland, little state in Australia, building more than 40 hospitals at the moment. So there's more than 30 rural and remote hospitals that we're replacing across the state. We have 3 major greenfield hospitals, 13 major expansions, one of them more expensive than the greenfield hospitals. And then there's a range of other mental health projects. There's Queensland Ambulance Service projects. And then there's our ongoing sustaining capital asset renewal. So there is a lot going on. It's been we're 2 years old, so we're absolutely the new kid on the block. We've hired more than 200 people in the last 15 months. So we're building culture, we're building the systems, and we're working with the 16 hospital and health services on this new way of working, a new model. I also like to think that we do actually bring fresh thinking in Australia, and it doesn't just live in the UK. But we also need all of our suppliers to work with us on fresh thinking. So we've been very focused on standard designs. They actually have a lot of value to add. When we're talking about rooms and theatres and spaces, we do not have to redo that design over and over again. But when we're talking about the adjacencies, how does it fit into very small and tight campuses? Our cities do not have the space for large large horizontal expansions. So how do you bring our patients are getting more and more complex, they're living longer, and so they're dealing with heart disease, cancer, obesity, all at the same time. So how we bring in the workforce challenge, how many people we can actually hire as nurses and doctors, and how spaced out they are, and how we actually do that. All of those practical layers is what we need to bring into design, and our construction industry hasn't changed really for more than 100 years. So how do we focus on design for manufacture and assembly? That is something the UK is doing really well, because they've got suppliers that are working with them to do that. And Emma and I and South Australia and Victoria, we're all talking about what is the way that we actually work on our designs for standardisation that are looking to kit of parts hospitals, so that we can modulise and off-site everything that can be. So, and if I took as long as Chris suggested to design and build hospitals, my entire team would be fired. So we have done those 14 major expansions, their planning, their design, their tender, and 5 of them already in construction in less than 18 months. Now, with pace comes risk, but we are certainly managing that, I think, incredibly well. We've had consultants with us on that journey behaving really differently. We've had some fantastic PMs. We still have other PMs that behave like a postbox and add absolutely no value to the process. And we have managing construction companies that are truly working with us. I bring them in with my team every month and actually make them help work with us on the program of work. Under the procurement model in Queensland at the time, I was made to construct them all one project at a time instead of as a major program of work. But we have forced ways of working and collaboration and partnership. And I'd say their first 6 months in that sandpit was very uncomfortable. And they've got much more comfortable problem solving together for trade supply. So yes, we do have a very ambitious program. Yes, we always knew that that would create trade supply. What would those profiles look like? How do we work together? And how do we standardise and bring in a standard approach to as many elements across that design as we possibly could? So it's been a fantastic journey, lots of lessons learned. We are very much the new kid on the block. But what we've achieved in that period of time, and our building and remote program would be the largest modular program, I think, certainly in a health context in Australia. And it has meant that those communities are getting hospitals far faster. It also means in places like Normanton and Thursday Island and Doomadgee and Camberwell, which opened just in the last month on the border of Northern Territory and Queensland, we can manage wet season better, we can manage staffing better, and we can also work with those local communities around design. So one of the proudest things I've worked, and Paul Emmett's here today, and Tim, one of my EDs, and Miller, they've all been part of this big journey, is the First Nations engagement framework, where, listening to that story this morning around that residential aged care facility and how important that is. When we talk about sustainability in the future, if we think about the principles that First Nations in Australia bring to our designs, actually the synergy between that conversation is so powerful and so important, and that listening and being able to respond. But that does come back to procurements. The health budget would be Pac-Man in every state. We could eat the entire budget. And so how do we build more with less? How do we work through our procurement and our business cases? We are doing more than 45 active business cases at the moment. So there is that going on as well. And working through what does that business case, what risks do we need to answer when? What condition assessments are we doing? How are we doing geotech? How are we doing our master planning? I'm sorry, but new into health in comparison to other sectors that I've worked in, and the master planning of our campuses is falling. It's generally late. There's no understanding of zonal and adjacencies and capacities. And we inherit all sorts of buildings that have just been plonked everywhere, and then you come back to try and manage that later. It's incredibly difficult. So making our buildings flexible, but actually looking at the master plan and the surrounding precinct and all the land and how that comes together. So working through around not making our hospitals bigger for everything to go there, but what things can come out of hospitals. Focus on mental health. We've got more than 1,000 patients nearly now around who are long-stay patients that should be in residential aged care, which is the responsibility of the Commonwealth. They're taking up beds in our hospitals. That's a major issue around capacity. So what does the infrastructure solution look like when we can't staff the residential aged care sector and the private sector's coming out of that? So how do we bring those conversations together? Because it can't just be about the design of the buildings. I think there's another slide. So Queensland Health didn't have design principles that were being applied on any state-based level at all. Some HHSs had them, some didn't. So we introduced design principles when Health Infrastructure Queensland was established, so that we are working towards the core principles of what we're trying to achieve around future fit, flexible, sustainable and equitable infrastructure. We are the biggest population in terms of distribution in Queensland, and there is a massive difference between South East Queensland and regional, rural and remote. And how do you create that consistency and equity is a big part of what we do. And one of the core pieces, next slide, thanks, around the design principles was standardisation. If we could move to the next slide, that'd be great. And this has been a really big journey for us. So the Australian Health Facility Guidelines have been the base, and they're a really important base, but that practical lens around affordability and around linking it to manufacturing, and then thinking through what those adjacencies are and where we do need to make sure that we are building to country, building to those local communities. That is where the design is really important. It's not redesigning the same room over and over again. And of course, we all have to deal with our clinicians and our users respectfully. A big part of this is digital and VR, and how do we have those conversations with them together without having to repeat them over and over again, that you've all agreed on principles will be a big part of our efficiency. Thanks.
So looking at the investments that are being made in South Australia is pretty much around population growth. So by 2031, it's estimated that the population will increase to approximately 2 million people living in South Australia, with almost 300,000 will be aged over 70. So as we were talking about, that ageing population. So with that ageing population, we then have chronic and very complex health conditions that we need to manage, which leads to a greater demand in health and emergency services as well. So a health infrastructure program in South Australia, so our priorities are based on being patient-centred and delivering services that are sustainable, as well as easing that system burden and increasing capacity as well. So the ultimate goal is about creating an equitable health service, as well as responsive and providing that appropriate care. So in totality in South Australia, our infrastructure investment is over $6 billion, which is the largest in our state's history. And so included within that $6 billion is the $3.2 billion New Women's and Children's Hospital. So in my role as the Director of Capital Projects Infrastructure, and in my portfolio consists of about 50 projects to the value, it's a bit over $2 billion. But that excludes the New Women's and Children's Hospital. So if you've got any questions about that, I'm happy to take all of that on notice and get back to you on that. And so today I'll be looking at this discussion with a bit more of an infrastructure lens, and given the broadness of the discussion and our time limitations, I've chosen just to briefly touch on future-proofing and the utilisation of our existing assets, and looking at some of those ESD initiatives and looking at high-performance teams. So future-proofing and utilisation of existing assets. So an example that utilises this and through future-proofing and providing those provisions and also utilising an existing asset is a project that was recently completed at the Larmature Hospital, which was delivered amazingly below budget and ahead of schedule. Not many of them around. So initially in 2013, as part of a previous development, we delivered an inpatient building, which was built over 2 levels with 96 inpatient rooms, with their own sole occupancy rooms with en-suites and spaces. So, and it also had a helipad provided above. So as part of the broader master planning work that was undertaken at that time, and looking at those projections and looking at future modelling, the team was encouraged to look at how we could future-proof. The site is also landlocked as well. There's not much room for development left on the Larmature site. So what was done was we built a level 3 slab, and it had all the set downs which were the same as the levels below. We also raised the helipad to level 4.5, so level 3 had ample space to be built in the future, and that became the location of this recently completed project. So the largest risk to this project was the risk of ingress, because we had built a slab and then we put a temporary roof over the top. So as we uncovered the roof, then over time we thought there were 2 operational floors below. Biggest risk was water ingress. So to mitigate this risk, we had the managing contractor get together with the design team, and what they ended up designing was a scaffold system around the entire perimeter of the building, and built a timber truss roof with a roof over the top. And from level 3 to the ceiling, there was a 7-metre space in there, so that they could build the entire fit out. They could have their spider cranes and installing all of their structural steel. They could build everything within that without being affected by the elements. So the scaffold system had a dual process as well. The building was clad in a now non-compliant aluminium composite cladding, So we had to go through the process of replacing the cladding around the entire building. So we had some cost savings because we could use that as a dual purpose. So through this project, not only did we utilise an existing asset, but we also benefited from the future proofing from 11 years ago. The temporary roof structure, which mitigated that ingress of water, allowed the floors below to be completely operational whilst we were in construction, and there was very minimal disruption. But we also saved on inclement weather, which saved us on time. Also, the money that we've saved, we are now refurbishing a non-clinical area and turning it into additional beds to help support the ED flow. Looking at some ESD considerations. So in South Australia, we have implemented our own health kind of green rating tool, which is called RDRAT, which is the in-house green rating assessment tool. And it's loosely based on the Green Building Council of Australia, that tool, but it's really specifically focused on our health facilities. And we use it for our new and rebuild. So the ESD initiatives are depending on the actual build that we're doing. So it's pretty much a bespoke approach for every project. So the recently completed Queen Elizabeth Hospital Clinical Services building is our first all-electric building with no gas. So we ended up saving, in greenhouse emissions, it was reduced by 41.8%. So other initiatives that we used on the project was the significant saving of carbon by utilising timber LVLs rather than steel for our secondary steel structure. There was also 99% waste, which was diverted from landfill. So looking ahead in the future with our net zero emissions targets, our infrastructure team is now looking at what we can make that is mandatory, that is achievable, that is affordable. So on all of our projects, it's just electrification throughout. We're now looking at that waste diversions and looking at those targets, looking at sustainable timber and green concrete. So that is a work in progress that we will be working on through this year and through next year as well. Finally, next slide. What underpins all of these strategies ultimately is the people, you, me, everybody. So a team is more than just a group of individuals working on a project. A high-performing team is a group of individuals with that common vision, common goal, and who collaborate, challenge each other to achieve outstanding results. So on that TQEH project, which was the first, and we're now implementing it across all of our major projects, we've got a high-performance framework being rolled out. And we found that on this project, it was hugely successful. So what we had is the project team and the managing contractor or the contractor comes on board. They agree on these key result areas, KPIs, and what is best for project and what is best for the decisions, making best decisions for the project as well. So the concept involves an incentive payment to the project team. And it comes from the principal's contingency. So on the TQEH project, we actually started with no principal's contingency. We had a lot of budget issues. But through the collaboration of the team, through this high-performance framework, through the KRAs and the KPIs, the team actually created an incentive funding and created this principal's contingency, which we benefited from at the end of the project. So this framework helps to support the project. It supports the project team on making, again, those best for project decisions. And as you can see here, this is just some of the examples of the key result areas and the key performance indicators on this particular project. As part of it, it also brings out those 5 performance behaviours in teams, including like collaboration and commitment and determination, respect, trust, honesty and transparency. And so when you include all of that with all of these strategies, we really ultimately are working together to create the best future for our community and for our health, for you, for myself, for everyone.
Cool. Thank you. I worry these panels sometimes turn into a competition to see who's got the worst portfolio of projects. So here's kind of my pitch for that role. So Priscilla thinks she's the new kid on the block, but I think I'm newer. I've been in my role for about 7 months, and I think we're probably still at about -2 months on our kind of start date as a proper infrastructure delivery unit within New Zealand. So many of you who will have been following the reforms in New Zealand, just over 2 years ago, there was a decision to bring all of our district health boards together into a single national health services provider, Health New Zealand. Infrastructure got thrown in with that, so we kind of by default came together as a national infrastructure unit within there. But as with many reforms, that was more of a change on paper than it was in practice. We maintained all of those legacy infrastructure settings. So we had 20 different organisations within one organisation, 20 different districts running their projects in their own way. So the last couple of years has really been about, they called it in great political speak, simplify to unify. And it was about trying to bring those things together. I started in April this year. I was just starting to get on and get to know our board of Health New Zealand. 6 weeks into my time, it found out that we had some massive financial problems as an organisation. The board disappeared, we got a commissioner, and now we're into the process of devolution as our operations get split back into kind of 4 regional structures. But out of that, it seems that there is this understanding that infrastructure is one of those things that really benefits from a national approach. So it's looking more and more like as we head into 25, we'll start to see some similarities perhaps between our structures and some of the other structures here, but waiting for those kind of final decisions on structure and role and mandate to be made over the coming weeks and months as a last part of the year Christmas present to all of us worried about our jobs as we go into the break. It's been fascinating getting my head into this job, understanding the portfolio of projects we have. We have a large number of projects. None of them are going very well, unfortunately. Something to do with some COVID cost inflation, quite a lot of reform, a lot of people coming in and out, perhaps taking their eyes off the ball. So this year really has been about trying to reset, stabilise, get that kind of basic hygiene in place and rebuild the trust and confidence that we need with a new governance structure, with our ministers, with the Minister of Finance, and with our communities who frankly are pretty frustrated with the performance we've had on lots of our projects over the past 5 years. If we just jump forward, I'll jump through this really quickly. So in all of this, though, we've been trying to ask these big questions. How do we start to set ourselves up for the future? And that's what I'm really excited. It's why I came to this job. It's what I've enjoyed with the bandwidth I have. I had a great time talking to Chris last night about some of these ideas, because fundamentally, the big idea that I keep coming back to is the way we have been doing things, the way we've been thinking about things is not a proportionate response to the problems we have in front of us. And kind of broad metrics, I look at our hospital estate. We have 86 campuses, 2.2 million square metres of hospitals in use. Today it has an average age of 48 years. So somewhere along the line, in the pretty near future, we've got to think about refurbishing, relifing, rebuilding almost all of our health estate. At the same time, you look at kind of aging and growing demographics, you'd say we probably need another 1 million square metres on top of that just to kind of hold level with the amount of infrastructure. And I think in our biggest year ever, we might have delivered kind of 200,000 square metres. So we're talking about fundamentally, and it's shown here in a graph, a fundamental step change in what we need to output. So we feel like we're right at the start of this journey that other jurisdictions have been on. At the same time, when we have tried to increase capacity, we've gone backwards in terms of productivity. So it's pretty clear to me as we look at this that this isn't simply a matter of trying to push more things through the system in the same way we've been doing it. So we're trying to think fundamentally differently about what our role is in the ecosystem. When you look at those graphs, what it tells me is we can't think about procurement and tendering the same way. You know, the idea that you can go out and run and tender makes sense when there is ample capacity for the types of projects. If we're in a world where everyone is engaged, then our methodology needs to be different. It's not about buying the services the cheapest way. We need to think about how we allocate the right types of service to the right types of problems, how we make sure we are creating incentives so that everyone in that industry goes to bed every night thinking about trying to solve these big national problems. And I think it's pretty clear when I look around the ways in which we've approached projects in the past, that's not true. I think people spend more time going to bed about worrying about how to maintain professional indemnity insurance than they do about trying to solve big chunky problems. So there's something wrong with our incentives we've created in design and procurement in the past. I'll probably just jump forward because I know we're out of time. But, we've been asking these questions, what does good look like? This is one of my favourite provocations because it always generates a response. But it was one of these questions, what we see when we look at this is just beds per GFA in hospitals. And some hospitals have, twice the number of beds per square metre. And this is one of those questions that I'm asking is, all of that extra area adding value, is it enabling us to deliver health services more effectively? What is the story behind these graphs and different things? And what does it mean for how we define what a good hospital is, what a good hospital project is? And that's where I really loved Chris's presentation because, we were talking about that last night. How do we go into a world where we know we're going to be refitting hospitals many times in their lifetime? So how do we start to perhaps separate those questions of structural design versus fit-out design so we can get on building structure now and take that time to plan what goes in it later? It's going to be those types of mindsets that enable us to grapple with those challenges. Just quickly on my last slide, I guess, that's forced us to think differently about our procurement processes. So we're just in the process of closing a design procurement process that we've run for what we call our regional hospitals program. It's 5 new major hospital redevelopments around New Zealand. We've procured this completely at a portfolio level and we've signed $0 contracts with the successful consultants. So we're bringing on that design capacity and then deciding later which projects we apply to or which packages of work we apply them to, because like I said, we are interested in these ideas of it might not necessarily be a hospital for everyone, but it might be a structural package for one firm and a fit-out package for another firm, so that we start to get those different types of tension and dynamic and starting to think about, what would that look like as we go forward? What are those types of structures where we've got everyone engaged collectively on this problem solving with the right incentives to be investing in their capabilities, thinking about solving these problems, and really working with us in a long-term partnership to deliver this infrastructure that is so important for our communities. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Stuart.